All right, so imagine you're a teenager. Hell, our analytics tell us that you probably are. And imagine you build something bigger than yourself, bigger than a YouTube channel or a Twitch page, and millions of people around the world know who you are. That was the case for Hecz and the Green Wall, Optic Gaming, a brand synonymous with Call of Duty, until just recently, when it all ended. And today, I'm gonna tell you that story. "2017. It really feels like a long time ago in esports, doesn't it? That was an era where the outside world finally saw esports as a way that they could make money. You'll remember that this was the time where external funding sort of started to creep its way into esports. Orgs were going out and finding investors to help them buy slots in leagues like the LCS or the Overwatch League, and that was allowing them to pay people extra money. Now, this created a kind of chain reaction inside of esports, because when the top orgs like Liquid or Cloud9 go out and get some outside investment, then you need to find your own to follow suit. Because how are you supposed to compete for players or market share or extra clout if you don't have the cash to do it? In 2017, the Overwatch League was starting, and so was the franchised LCS. And these leagues had massive price tags on their slots, and that increased the need for these teams to go out and get some extra money. And so going back to Optic, that's exactly what Hector Rodriguez, you probably know him as Hecz, did. He went out and got some cash to compete in this increasingly competitive esports world. And so that's where my story today begins, with a company called Texas Esports Holdings that eventually decided to invest in Optic Gaming. That company and Hector made a deal for some shares in Optic, and Texas Esports Holdings ended up making a company called Infinite Esports that would house Optic within their company. And it was with that money that Optic could now afford a franchise spot in the LCS and the Houston Outlaws spot in the Overwatch League. Now, it's easy to see these big flashy numbers and new logos and new jerseys as a positive thing for esports org. And honestly, on the surface, they really are. But it's important to sort of look under the surface as well. When these mergers happen, it's not all roses for these companies. The fact is, on that day, Optic was sold to Infinite. That meant that they had majority control and Hecz no longer could make decisions on behalf of his company. The point I'm trying to make here is that when these things happen, although these organizations get the money they need to keep growing, a massive amount of agency exchanges hands. So now Optic's got this League of Legends slot, an Overwatch League slot, Infinite's in charge, and Hecz hands over a lot of the day-to-day responsibilities to Optic J. Now, Hecz says the reason he did this was so that after years of running this company, he could go back to what he really loved.
The reason that I chose to step back was to create content and have fun.
Right.
Without the worry of spreadsheets and without the worry of any of that bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay?
And that's kind of where everything broke down. So as with most multi-million-dollar investments, this thing wasn't perfect off the jump. And according to Hecz, money was just being spent in the wrong places.
I remember walking in, seeing the allegiance flag, and I pointed at it. I'm like, what the fuck is that? Why is there another team's flag in my offices? Right? Because up until the point, they hadn't told me that they were going to pick up all these other teams for whatever fucking reason.
Right.
And I walk in and I look at Jay and I'm like, what the? And he's like, you just did that. And I was just like, no, I need an explanation as to what the fuck this is.
Right.
And I see all these people and immediately I'm just like, oh, we don't need this many people.
Right.
We don't. For
Obviously.
what?
Right.
And this is where the dark side of this sort of suit and tie mergers and acquisitions business that's so popular in esports right now shows its face. And the fact is, despite Hecz trying to make his opinions known about his baby, Infinite didn't have to listen to him.
Nothing went smoothly. And it was always seeming to be Optic versus corporate.
And so with the org in a worse place than it's ever been, and Hecz and Infinite not getting along, they start to entertain a sale of the Optic name and the LCS slot to Immortals Gaming. Now, to say this would be horrible news for the Green Wall, the fans of Optic Gaming, would be an understatement. You see, if this acquisition ended up taking place, the Optic name in League of Legends would be switched to Immortals, and the only remnants of the Optic Gaming name would exist in the COD League, where Immortals had bought a spot previously. And notably, this would mean Hecz would have almost no connection to the brand that he's been working his entire life to build.
Optic J tried to Thanos us. Kidding me?
And so as you might imagine, Hecz was opposed. And he put together an offer to buy back Optic from Infinite and beat out Immortals.
Let me get Optic back. I wasn't asking for a discount. I was trying to make them some money so they, whatever. We gave it a good run.
But as we now know, Hecz lost that battle. He tried, he failed, and Optic just frankly doesn't really exist in the same capacity anymore. And so this brings me to a couple weeks ago, where Hecz has now announced that he's moving to NRG to become a co-CEO and help run their Call of Duty franchise. Everything that we've heard from Hecz since then has been thankful. He's thankful for the green wall and everything he built during all of those years at Optic. He says that he doesn't regret anything. And despite the way everything ended up, he looks back proud.
You are not gonna get rid of me until it's time for me to go. So you are with me, you're stuck with me. You're stuck on every single adventure that I go on. You're stuck on every single project that I'm gonna be a part of. And for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
And that brings me to, frankly, the bitter end of my story. Hecz and Optic, two names that were synonymous with esports for years, are no longer one. And honestly, that fucking sucks. This is really one of the first prominent casualties of this sort of corporate esports roller coaster that we've been on for the last few years. On the surface, people buying and selling companies and $30 million investment there and a Series B funding round there, it all looks great. But the fact is, when things get corporate, there's always going to be consequences. And this time, it was the death of the green wall.
Thanks for watching. If you want more content like this, hit the sub button and ring that notification bell. For unique bite-sized videos you won't find anywhere else, hit up our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook pages.